Do you remember when you could use the S Pen to take pictures? Well, not anymore, because Samsung has just removed this feature. Not to innovate, but screw you, that's why. And they're not alone. Apple removed the charger from the box to save the planet, or make $6 billion from it. And that's just the beginning. Oneplus removed one of their best features, and Google has made some questionable decisions. These aren't just accidents, they are choices. So let's talk about some of the saddest smartphone downgrades ever. Let's start with the S Pen. For years, this thing wasn't just a stylus, it was actually a useful tool. You could stand back from your phone, click a button, and snap a photo, or control your music without even touching your phone. But in 2025, Samsung has decided that this feature is just too good, and $1,300 is just not enough. They said that Bluetooth was removed, basically due to a lack of use, but how does removing a feature benefit us? Well, it doesn't. If you look at Jerry-Rig Everything's S25 Ultra durability test, the S Pen no longer has a battery, which was there to support Bluetooth functionality. Instead, they left an empty space. So they didn't do anything with this extra space, not even a bigger battery on the phone or anything. But wait, you know what else has Bluetooth functionality? The Galaxy Ring and the Galaxy smartwatch. You're not losing a feature, you're gaining an opportunity to buy that feature back. Only if you spend $1,700 on it. But it's not the first time that Samsung has done something like this. You know the crazy 100x zoom claims that the Ultra models are known for? Well, up until recently, Samsung used a 10 megapixel 10x optical sensor and crop it in to 100x until, well, you got this garbled looking oil painting. But with the S24 Ultra, they downgraded to a 5x optical zoom, but with 50 megapixels. Sure, the new sensor has more megapixels, but it also has less optical range. And with less optical range, the S24 Ultra uses more AI and more guessing to produce a similar quality image. And yeah, technically the 5x sensor is bigger and it has a lower aperture, so it's gonna be better in low light, so it's gonna make up for that difference, right? But on the S23 Ultra, at least you had the option to use the real 10x optical zoom, as long as you had enough light. But now Samsung has taken that ability away. There was probably other good reasons like size, weight, and cost, but it still feels like a downgrade. I'm not even gonna waste my time crying over the loss of the headphone jack or the micro SD cards, because those topics are milked to death and I've already covered it before. So instead, I'm gonna continue cooking Samsung, because why the hell did they go back to Exynos? For countless years, even going back to the S3 in 2012, Samsung would release phones with different processors for different regions. The US and China would get Snapdragon and the rest of the world would get Exynos because it's their own chip, so it's cheaper to make. And it was wildly known that Snapdragon versions are just better. They had better battery life, better benchmark scores, better cameras, less overheating. And it was quite annoying knowing that if, say you're in the UK, you were paying full price for what felt like an inferior phone. So if you wanted Snapdragon, you either had to get the Ultra model or import the phone. But something changed with the S23, because finally, it was launching globally with the Snapdragon 8 Gen 2. They finally gave up the efforts and let everyone have the same equal performance. They brought back Exynos. Come on. Although this time the differences between Exynos and Snapdragon weren't that big, but it still felt like we were edged a little bit and it still felt like a step back. But enough of Samsung, let's start grilling Google a little bit, because some of their decisions are just laughable. Firstly, what is up with this notch? The Pixel 3 XL must have one of the ugliest designs I have ever seen. They literally put a bathtub on the screen. Compare this to the last year's Pixel 2, and yeah, it had thick bezels, but at least they were even. They completely butchered the design here. And then the next year, the Pixel 4, it looked better, but it also lost the fingerprint scanner and it only had face unlock. And then the COVID pandemic hit and people had to wear masks and the face unlock was messing up. Wow. Good timing. They removed the fingerprint scanner from the back and didn't even think about putting it on the front or on a button. Big mistake. They were just constantly downgrading their phones every year. And it wasn't even that much better with the Pixel 6, because they moved from Snapdragon to Tensor chips, which were based on Exynos, which apparently had heating issues, which I personally experienced on the Pixel 8 Pro. Google definitely had a bumpy ride, but here comes Apple. So in 2020, with the release of the iPhone 12, they removed the charger from the box to apparently save the planet. Excluding the charger and the earbuds would lead to less mining, less packaging, and less planet-heating carbon dioxide emissions that are associated with making the products. Also, the box got a lot slimmer, so they could apparently fit up to 70% more devices onto a pallet. But Apple benefited more than the planet did, because apparently, as a result, Apple saved $6.5 billion. They didn't include chargers, but also sold them separately for $20, which came in separate boxes anyway, so it's not really saving the environment. And at the same time, they promoted wireless charging, because if you don't have a charger in the first place, well, you might as well go for wireless charging, even though it's more expensive. And you know the worst part? Other companies copied it. Samsung removed the charger from the S21, Google removed the charger from the Pixel 6, but you know who didn't? Oneplus, because they removed something else. What is up with companies just removing everything? First, I have to explain how confusing the lineup got. They had the OnePlus 9 and the OnePlus 9 Pro. Then they released the OnePlus 10 Pro without releasing the normal 10, and then they released the 10T, which was supposed to be an upgraded version of the 10, which didn't exist. And then they released the 11 and the 12, which didn't have any Pro or T models. But that's not the problem here. The OnePlus 10 Pro had wireless charging, but they removed it on the 11. And sure, you might say that the 10 was a Pro model, but there was no 11 Pro, so automatically the 11 is the top tier model. So you wouldn't expect any compromises on a flagship model, right? Well, that's why they brought it back with the OnePlus 12. It does kind of make sense though, because the OnePlus 11 had 100-watt fast charging, so it's not like many people would be using wireless charging anyway. Plus, it saved the company some money. They probably realized that they messed up, so they brought it back since no one else was removing it. Another big oopsie was with the infamous OnePlus 10T. As I mentioned before, the 10T is supposed to be a superior version of the normal 10, which didn't exist, so it has to be worse than the 10 Pro. But it was a lot worse. They've removed one of their most iconic features, the alert slider. Why? They said that it took a lot of internal space, which could be used for something else. But that was their signature feature, and it became a part of their brand identity. And removing something like that felt really disappointing, because it felt like the company was drifting away from the core principles that made OnePlus stand out. It just made them seem more generic and hurt the brand loyalty. They went from never settle to settle for less, or never mind, I'll just get a Samsung. But OnePlus has messed up even way before that with the OnePlus 9. They decided to remove the OIS, or the optical image stabilization, from the base model. OIS basically helps the phone take less blurry pictures by slightly moving the lens to compensate for the hand movements, stabilizing the image. This especially helps in low light scenarios where you have to hold your phone really still. This was a questionable move, because with the OnePlus 9 series, they partnered up with Hasselblad to improve the camera experience by tuning the colors, which made OnePlus sound way more premium, but the absence of OIS felt like a complete contradiction. It felt like a one step forward, one step backwards situation, and if you wanted the OIS back, you had to buy the OnePlus 9 Pro, which started at almost $1,000, which was obviously an upsell, and once again, it weakened the trust of OnePlus because it no longer focused on value. Now that we've covered some of the big stuff, let's hit some honorable mentions in a more fast-paced round. When Apple released the 15 Pro, that had a 3x zoom lens, and the 15 Pro Max had a 5x lens. But with the 16 Pro Max and the regular Pro, you no longer had 3x zoom, only 5x, which means that everything up until then is digital zoom. Not really a downgrade, because now the zoom is technically better, but the 3x being 77mm meant that it was perfect for portrait shots. By the way, Samsung has both 3x and 5x, which fixes this issue. When Xiaomi released the Mi 10 Ultra, that had 120 watts, which fully charged the phone in 23 minutes with obvious risks like heat and longevity. But the Mi 11 Ultra downgraded to 67 watts, which took 36 minutes to fully charge. And since then, none of their Ultra phones even reached 100 watts, which sounds like a big downgrade. And obviously 90 watts is fast enough for everyone, and the battery lives have gotten so much better, so in a way it was a good trade-off. We lost the pop-up cameras, which gave us an uninterrupted full screen experience, even though we didn't have any durability issues with those cameras. Apple discontinued the 3D touch with the iPhone 11, which let you hard press on the screen to access some shortcuts. They also removed physical buttons, which obviously let them shrink the bezels, but it was so cool when you could actually press something and get a satisfying click. The OnePlus 13 ultra-wide camera became a lot smaller than the OnePlus 12. It's not necessarily worse in quality, but the physical size is smaller for whatever reason. The S20, S21 and the Note 20 all had hybrid zoom, which basically had an almost identical sensor to the main camera that had 64 megapixels. And then they would crop into that 64 megapixels and call it hybrid zoom. Previously, they had real 2x optical zoom cameras, so I thought this downgrade was kinda silly. And speaking of Note, the Note 20 was worse than the Note 10 because it had a plastic back, but compare that to the Note 20 Ultra, it was a huge downgrade. It only existed to make the Note 20 Ultra look way better in comparison. And that's it for my list, so if you enjoyed the video, good for you. And if you have any other major downgrades that I missed, leave them in the comments. I won't remove them.